Welcome to the new JFK show, number 243. We're going to flip over our trusty hourglass. And tonight's show is going to be, watch us pull a rabbit out of our hat. You're going to see what the JFK show team can do with absolutely zero preparation. But with Larry Rivera on the team, we're going to do the best that we can do. And that's as honest as I can be, folks. So, Larry, let's talk to us. And I will say this, that the documents that were, the 2017 documents are as fruitful as the Ogden 6. Let's say that. And in my mind, have solved the case. If you go back to the last, I'd say from JFK 215 on, pretty much cinches it up. If you can pay attention. Now, you got to pay attention because there's a lot of code words, code names, things like that. So if you don't know who NJRNX3N, you don't know that's the president of Mexico, then you might not get it. So there you go. All right, so Larry, go ahead and take over and see what we have tonight.
Oh, wow. That's pretty good, Gary.
I'm rolling. I hope we can follow up on the intro.
Well, we've been doing on the new documents for a while now, and it's a very rich vein, I have to say. And I've done already 2 conferences bringing out new information. And it looks like we're going to be doing many, many more in the near future, especially on the Mexico City angle of the case. All right. A lot of new names are coming out that we never knew before. And the reason is that all these names had been covered up, had been withheld by the powers that be, because they didn't want us to connect the dots on what all these people were doing in Mexico City. Okay, now, for example, to give you an idea, you know how many people were employed by the chief, chief of station, Win Scott, in Mexico City? Just take a wild guess. How many people do you think?
50.
Huh?
200. 250.
Not even close.
500?
Double that and a little
more than 1,000?
1,200.
Wow.
Just keeping track. Awesome. Man.
1,200.
So that's what it takes to keep track of everybody at the Russian embassy, the Cuban embassy.
Well, a lot of these operations had to do with recruiting agents that will double up, and bring back information, out of the Cuban embassy, the consulate, the Soviet embassy, and a lot of the impetus here was on trying to get as much information because the 2 points, the 2 points on Earth that had the most exchange of assets and agents, believe it or not, were New York City and Mexico City. And Mexico City, obviously because, being a sovereign republic, and being so close to the U.S., the Soviets, had, a lot of presence there, and in order to counter that, well, the U.S. obviously had to, get going and really, really deploy a lot of resources in Mexico City. That's why when I read that 1,200, that just blew my mind, because I thought that's just an incredible amount of people, and the facilities and everything there at the U.S. Embassy, So, and being in, in consort with the Mexican government, where we have already talked about how 3 consecutive Mexican presidents were CIA assets from 1958 to 1976.
That's how you keep the Russians out. Beautiful.
Well, not only that, that's how you create, a legend of whatever you want to create. That whatever happened in Mexico City regarding Lee Oswald, Sylvia Duran, and many others, that are in this novella, so to speak, So anyway, I've got a couple of documents, and I want to introduce this one major player. Remember we talked about Ann Goodpasture and how she was involved, you know, with Lee Envoy and Lee MT, you know, the Lee MT being the photograph surveillance, you know, of the both embassy and both embassies, and the Lee Envoy, which was a wiretap operation, joint wiretap between the U.S. and the Mexican government. And again, I have to reiterate and I have to stress, you know, that it gets pretty easy when the president of Mexico is in your pocket, you know. And we're talking about Lopez Mateos, Ordaz, and Echeverria, consecutive Mexican presidents, all the way to 1976, almost 20 years, Jim and Gary. So, you know, when this whole scenario plays out in Mexico City, the president of Mexico was Adolfo Lopez Mateos, and who went by the cryptonym of Letenzor. Okay, Ordaz went by the cryptonym of Letempo II, and Echeverria went by the cryptonym of Lee Envoy II. So, you know, it was extremely easy to create this legend, you know, of whatever they wanted the official version to have been whatever, you know, because they were in complete control. Okay, when you control, you know, the government and all the investigative agencies in Mexico, the press, you know, and everything out there, you know, then, you know, I'd have to say that Lee Oswald never had a chance. You know, whatever they created in Mexico, you know, it's what went. And, you know, I just have to say that, like I said, Lee never had a chance, you know, when you're up against, you know, that amount of firepower.
All right, as far as the whole framing of Lee Oswald with the trip to Mexico and all that kind of stuff, I mean, what's your viewpoint on it 50 years later? Was it just a colossal failure? Did it cause enough confusion for the 50 years necessary? As Ed Lansdale said, you just need to cause enough doubt for 50 years. I mean, what do you think of the whole thing? Was it a flop? Did it work out fine? I mean, what do you think?
I think it's looking more and more, it's looking going in the direction that Lee was impersonated in Mexico. And this isn't new, because this is what came out of the Lopez report. Okay, a lot of very respected authors and researchers have concluded that. All right, and now with the more and more documents, you know, that are coming out, it's and especially now, like I said, I cannot stress this, you know, enough. You know, when you have the presidents of Mexico controlling the local investigation there, you know, and just laying it, you know, in the CIA's lap, you know, and them following the CIA's instructions, you know, then it gets pretty easy. You know, it's kind of lopsided there. Like I said, Lee never had a chance. You know, whatever they wanted Lee to be in Mexico City, that's what the official version. Jim, you have anything to say about that?
No, I think you got it exactly right, Larry, that they could manufacture any outcome they want, just as going on in the United States today with gun control. If they want to create a fantastic story about the massive firepower of an AR-15, they can fake it. They got one going on in Philadelphia now where the police are claiming they're outgunned by one shooter with an AR-15 when they could take him out anytime they want. They just clear the building and you could fire in a bazooka if you wanted. I mean, this is completely a joke. And you're going to have a whole lineup of Democratic politicians are going to fall in line and say, oh, yes, we have to take these weapons away for the American people. The public is going to be played as much by these Democrats as Lee was being played, meaning the story they were making up about him was coming out of Mexico City because the CIA was in control from the top to the bottom.
Yeah. All right, Dr. Fetzer, give us a quick version on why is the Mexico City trip so important to the entire JFK research?
Well, of course, because it's fabricating a rationale that Lee Oswald was a communist sympathizer, was working under the orders of either Fidel Castro or the Soviet Union to take out JFK. and that he was plotting his escape by going to obtain a visa to get himself to Cuba, and then from there to flee to the Soviet Union, where he'd been and married a woman who was a niece of a KGB official. It was really quite a story they were weaving, but they were very clever in how they were planning the various elements.
And Jim, and the stakes were even higher because based on that provocation, that would have been an ideal scenario to go ahead and invade Cuba, and take Cuba right back, from.
But then all of a sudden, all this preparation for Cuba, and it never happened. So explain to us why the Cuba end and all this preparation never really did pan out. Is it LBJ wanting to go to Vietnam?
No, well, we did a show recently on the invasion that never happened and why that invasion never happened, and and the firepower that was involved in this invasion. And we all know that the reason, obviously, is because thermonuclear weapons were involved, and everybody had their thumb on the button, and whoever blinked, was the one that was going to have to, step back, So that's why, this never happened, because once the Cuban Missile Crisis came about and the threat, of the whole eastern seaboard being wiped out, in a couple of minutes, that's what held all these invasion plans in check.
But suddenly they weren't blaming it on Cuba or Russia. It was just a lone crazy nut. So,
but Lee Oswald is the pawn in all this, and believe it or not, what's so incredible is that his defection to the Soviet Union and his background, and everything, just made him, such a perfect patsy and a perfect pawn.
Right. But, I always wanted to ask you this, Larry. Yeah, he was the perfect one, but why were they looking to view Wesley Frazier and Billy Lovelady during the day of the assassination if he was so perfect?
That's a great question, because you never know if he was going to get caught. If he was going to.
I got it. He could have done a somersault in the middle of Dealey Plaza, and he could have been doing cartwheels. Then you have to go with,
he was under some type of control there, to stay put, and that's something that.
Yes, Bill Shelley.
He could have tripped on a banana peel and fallen down a flight of stairs.
Right,
we just don't have him available any longer by circumstances beyond their control.
I mean, it's not as crazy as it sounds. A lot of things could have gone wrong, and actually did when they photographed him in the doorway, but they had to fix that right away.
Yeah, well, I want to show you guys a real interesting document here. Let me see if I can get. Here we go. Yeah, and this came out on November the 23rd. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
Yeah. And this is from one Lawrence Barker, and this is a cryptonym that belonged to Robert Shaw, who was probably the third in command there in Mexico City. And this one is just wild because, November the 23rd, probably they haven't even charged Lee, by the time when this came out, and is talking about, in view of the fact that Mexican authorities closed the U.S.-Mexican border. What this means is that there was talk going back and forth that some kind of crew was trying to make their escape from Dallas through the Mexican border, and on their own initiative yesterday in an effort to make escape difficult for the Kennedy assassins.
Plural.
Well, the hyphen means, Larry, singular or plural.
Right, yeah. So obviously, they haven't made up their mind yet here if it's going to be, put on just one lonely patsy there, And I think we should give serious consideration to asking the Mexican authorities here in Mexico City to put a police cordon around the Cuban embassy and require all visitors to identify themselves entering and exiting.
But notice they are talking about the Cuban embassy, so they're talking about an affiliation with Cuba, communists, operators, assassins, etc. So that seed is clearly planted there.
Yeah, absolutely. That they're trying to lay this, as a precursor there to lay it over on Castro here.
Right, they're not surrounding the French embassy.
So,
right, that's right.
Yeah.
or the UK, or the
Fill in the blank. Fill in the blank.
whatever. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we left off on our Lee Envoy talk, you know, one of the things that comes out of this Lee Envoy is all these cables that were manufactured, and I have to say manufactured because all these cables just stink to being, you know, complete forgeries, you know, and we've talked about the possibility of that. And when you look at the reports for Lee Envoy and you look at other reports where other agents, you know, never even talked about even seeing Lee Oswald, even, you know, in any way. And let me see if I can bring this one up real quick. Yeah, here's a really good one. Going back to the Lawrence F. Barker thing, this is a meeting with Litamil 9, the 23rd and 27th of November. Okay, Litamil 9 was an agent, a deep penetration agent is what I'm going to call this guy. And he worked at the Cuban embassy. And he was an informant. He was an agent for the CIA for many years, probably maybe 8 to 10 years. Okay, and that's a long time, you know, to not be discovered, you know, or even to be suspected, you know, of being an agent. And so, and I want to draw your attention here to paragraph number 2. Oh, by the way, his name was Luis Albero. Luis Albero, okay? And here, Barker, this is the way this operates, and this is a perfect example of how the agent and the handler used to interact. We already remember when we did Leering 3 with Wallace Roughton and Carlos Jurado del Mar, and you know, that relationship that also spanned, you know, almost a decade, at least you know, 6 or 7 years, and how they used to, you know, meet and, you know, at different times and odd places and everything. And this one is on the night of 23 November, Litamil 9, which is Albero, contacted Barker. Barker is Shaw by phone, and the meeting was held at 21:30. 21:30 is what, 10:30, right? Jim?
24-hour clock, yeah.
10:30?
It's 9:30.
9:30.
Yeah.
To 22, I mean, you know.
9:30 to 11:30.
Right. There you go.
9:30 to 10:30, I'm sorry.
Yeah. 10:30 for making the contact was to express his condolences for the recent assassination of President Kennedy. It was clear that L9, which is Litamil 9, was badly shaken up by this happening. When he spoke of Mrs. Jacqueline Kennedy, his eyes clouded up with tears. Okay.
Of course. Of course.
Anyway, L9, which is Litamil, was asked if he had ever seen Oswald. And this guy was in the Cuban consulate embassy every day of, you know, every day that every work day, and he was there for hours. You know, he knew everybody. He knew Eusebio Asque, the ambassador. He knew Sylvia Duran. He knew Teresa Proenza. He knew everybody. I mean, there was nothing that went down there because plus he was an informant, so he was paid to make sure that he knew everything that was going on there, Jim, you know, in the embassy. And his name?
His negative answers to these questions are actually quite telling.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is the 23rd of November. This is the day after the assassination. And this Barker guy he's trying to find out what really went on in the embassy. You know, this is so telling here, Jim, because you know, to me, this is another smoking gun that tells you that the embassy made up all that bull crap about the cables and Lee Oswald, you know, because, you know, they're completely in the dark here. He's asking him, did he see Lee Oswald there in the embassy? Did he know anyone in the Cuban embassy that knew Oswald or knew anything about him? And the answer is no. Okay, and then...
Oh, wait, other than finding Sylvia Duran hanging from a chandelier with Lee Oswald in the office room, other than that, I didn't see anything.
Right? At this time, Sylvia Duran was in the hands of the Mexican police, but L9 was obviously unaware of her detention. Okay?
Yeah.
asked what the reaction of those inside the embassy was to the news of the president's death, Little 9 said that he had heard very little talk about it, that the Saturday morning staff meeting was a short, perfunctory affair, but that just about everyone seemed to be truly shocked. He had heard no one express pleasure about the killing. I mean, obviously, you know, and this is what really happened. You know, they're going to tell you, wait a minute. Everybody at the Cuban embassy, you know, was hooting and hollering. You know, they were with pleasure, you know, and clapping and, you know, celebrating that JFK, you know, got hit. You know, totally the contrary. When Fidel Castro found out about it, he said, "Man, this is real bad news.
This is not good.
This is not good at all." Okay,
yeah. Having to deal with LBJ instead of, you know, we all know that they started to correspond with each other and try to reach a peaceful conclusion.
Yeah, and you know, and he had heard no one expressing pleasure about the killing. He said that this reinforced his belief that once Fidel Castro falls, the Cuban people, even many of those who are now classified as patria o muerte types, you know, patria, which means motherland or death, will quickly show themselves to be essentially good people and essentially U.S. oriented. Okay, now I want to go here to 4 and here.
So you're saying guys whose job it was to know if Lee was there or not, and there was no one there that said they saw him?
Well, let's not forget that supposedly there was an incident that Lee made a big, and we've talked about this before, he made a big scene there at the embassy because he couldn't get a visa, right? And that they had to kick him out of the Asque had to kick him out, literally, you know, by the scruff of the neck, you know, out of the embassy because he was getting violent and he was making a scene there, you know. And so that if that had really happened, you know,
they would remember him.
This guy would have known about it, you know. But this guy, Little 9, also known as Luis Alberu, he doesn't even talk about that. And he's telling Barker, who is also completely in the dark, you know, that, hey, you know, everybody was really sad, you know, and this and that, you know, and we never saw Lee Oswald or anything, you know. So then another meeting was held 2100 to 2245 on 27 November. By this time, the arrest of Silva Duran was public knowledge, and L9 made it its first topic of discussion. This is when things are really hitting the fan, you know. Said that Silva was back at the embassy on Monday the 25th and said that she had been held for 6 hours by the federal police. She seemed to be quite pleased with her performance. I mean, this is, you know, this is where they really start to embellish this. You know, that's not true. She said she kept reminding the police that Mexico is a free country and that Constitution guaranteed their freedom from such persecution. To this, the police just laughed and said that the Constitution wouldn't do her any good in jail. She had better cooperate if she wanted to get out.
Yes, nice.
That's the Constitution right there, buddy.
She freely admitted that she had seen Oswald at the consulate.
Right. Suddenly she becomes very cooperative.
Yeah.
That he came looking for a visa, but that Cuba had answered the request. This seems like fast. What does that mean? To the effect that Oswald could not be issued a transit visa en route to the USSR unless he received a USSR visa. She said that the cops had threatened her with extradition to the U.S., which seems unlikely, whereupon she said she would be glad to go to the U.S. to face Oswald. She said that complaints would be made to President Lopez Mateos through Enrique Ramirez. L9 does not know who Ramirez is or what his access to LM is. Sylvia said that she was quite surprised that word of her arrest was relayed to blah, blah. Let's see. This is not what I wanted. Okay, here. This is not the one. L9 had nothing more to offer on the Kennedy assassination, was again shown a photo of Oswald, never saw the man.
Yeah.
There's not much talk around the embassy about the killing. Perhaps because no one is expected to approve of such a thing yet, as it's at the same time, no one wants to make too much fuss about it for fear of being suspected as being pro-American.
Pro-American.
Anyway, this is just a raw example here of a document that just totally derails what we've been fed, about the Lee Oswald affair in Mexico City. And so that's a pretty good introduction so that we can check out the cables that came out supposedly, and I have to say these came out after the fact. It's so obvious to me. The first one came out on 8 October 1963. Okay. Now, remember, we've been talking about Lee Envoy. Lee Envoy is a wiretap operation. And notice that, at this point in time, at this juncture, all the cables originating, none of these are from the principals at the station in Mexico City. Okay, we're going to see now that they were all women, and they were all, lower echelon people, in the hierarchy there at Mexico City, instead of being, Win Scott, for example, or R.L. Easby, who was second in command there, and that's a pseudonym. We're going to see who he was in a minute, or Herbert Manel, who was the person who was in charge of Russian affairs. Okay, those guys, all these cables should have come from these guys, but in fact, the people that are originating these cables are women, and that's what's so interesting about this here. And the first one here, American male who spoke broken Russian. This is the first one that comes out, broken Russian. Anybody who knew Lee knew that he didn't speak broken Russian. Right, Jim? And
Yeah.
Ask Marina.
Yeah. And,
Even Marina thought he was native, that he spoke Russian so fluently.
Yeah. And this is the first time that they come out and they say they have a photo of a male where they're trying to, coordinate the wiretap with the photos, which, they're just stumbling and bumbling here, because here they say apparent have photo of male appears to be entering the Soviet embassy at 12:16, leaving at 12:22. 1 October, apparently age 35, athletic build, 6 feet tall, receding hairline, balding top.
That's not Lee.
Source Lee Empty. Don't forget that Lee Empty is a photographic project there. So these are the cables, and the second one here that comes out on the 9th, okay, October the 9th. And notice here at the top, there's nobody originating this cable. It's been erased. And this is one of the documents that I presented.
It's a fabrication.
Or whoever, but then they put here a Bustos, that originated from Bustos. And we're going to talk about her in a minute, because that's a very interesting personality here in this whole thing here at Mexico City. And one who's flown under the radar, for 50-something years. Nobody ever talked about her. And I think it's important. I know of one author who's written a little bit about her, and but there's so many more documents that have come out about her. I counted almost 700 in the new document release. And before that, all we knew about her was that she was some kind of a desk jockey, a secretary, at the embassy. I mean, at the station, the CIA station in Mexico City. There's nothing further from the truth, So anyway, now we've got on the 9th, okay, the same cable coming out, all right? And according to Lee Envoy, 1 October, we already talked about this. Now, let's see, no local dissemination has been made. Now, on the 10th, is what Simpich has baptized these as the twin October the 10th cables. And he's got a theory of Angleton being on a mole hunt, and this eager woman, actually sending, the second cable, trying to snag the mole. But anyway, I don't want to, deviate, from what we're talking about here. But it's Bustos again here. See here? And she's the one that sends this cable. And I think it's worth, examining these, because they're both sent on the 10th. Okay, here's the second one. Okay, on the 10th. And they're significant because Now you've got two versions, and which one is the right one? Okay, and why is one being sent and then another one, and by supposedly somebody who shouldn't even be sending this, this Charlotte Bustos. Okay, and
let's say on the right-hand side, page 2, Larry. So it's as though this is 2 pages of the same cable, right?
Yeah, this is the left is the first and the right is the second page. That's correct.
So if we're talking about 2 different cables, we don't mean this is one cable of 2 pages.
Yeah, this is one cable of 3 pages. This is the last page right here.
Yeah, 3 pages. Contrasting that with yet another.
Yeah, with this one. This is
okay.
The second,
Okay, very good, very good.
which is a 2-page cable.
Right.
And there's a notation down here, eager.
I see there was stuff in the 3-pager they wanted to get rid of.
Well, they have different.
Or was it the other way around? There's stuff they wanted to add.
Well, the thing about is about what makes the first one so special is that it doesn't call Lee Oswald as Lee Harvey. It calls him Lee Henry.
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay.
Henry.
Yeah, and that is the name that was in his 201 file from before, when the Angleton had a file on him where they called him Lee Henry. So what this is conveying here is that somehow Angleton had his hands in this thing,
Yes.
where they're trying to set back, go back and rewind and come out with a different version, of Lee Oswald in Mexico City. Okay, but here's where they messed up because, and this is so obvious here, Lee Henry, and the way that this was cross-referenced, it went back to his 201 file, the Angleton's file, and the woman who ran this file through her name was Egerter, E-G-E-R-T-E-R, and a lot of researchers have pointed this out, and that's why this is so special here, and it's so telling, because
his weight at 165 pounds. I don't know if he ever weighed.
Even. I know exactly. That's another point here, and we're on 31 October 1959. He attempted to renounce his United States citizenship. Obviously, that was in his file.
And it also says blue eyes. I think he had this hazel colored eyes, as I recall from Judith.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, she always said they doctored all of his photos, so you really couldn't see his eyes.
Well, they also doctored some of the pictures to make him, exhibit a frown, in a lot of the pictures.
Like an inhumane person who had no feelings.
Right. Okay, Oswald. And so this is where they're, setting all this legend here on Lee Oswald, of what a communist, despicable communist, traitor he was, And
yeah, it was Lee Harold Oswald. I was wondering if that was any connection with. Remember when he got shot in the Dallas Police Department? The reporter said Lee Harold Oswald, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
and another thing that this cable tries to insinuate is that he gave up his U.S. citizenship, and that never really happened.
Right. It was all a pseudo defection on a Saturday or Sunday when the embassy wasn't actually open and they couldn't even conduct business. So it was all fake.
So then we have the 2nd October the 10th, and again it's Lee Henry, and sensitive source.
Here it just says Lee. Doesn't have the Henry or
at the top.
Oh, it does. I see it. Okay, I got it. Right.
Yeah, but it seems like it was added on later, But yeah, Lee Oswald, yeah. And again, receding hairline,
It doesn't have his weight here.
Yeah, 35 years old.
Doesn't have his eye color.
35 years old?
I know. They got him way too old.
Yeah.
But, they're claiming that Lee looked older than he actually was.
And also notice how they messed up Marina's name. That's not even close. It was Prusakova, okay? And all of this is in that Angleton file, you know. So this is proof here, Jim, that Angleton.
Yes, I like that. That's very good, Larry.
Had his hands in this. Now, who was this Bustos? You know, who's so prominently mentioned? You know, and you want to go ahead and read some of this, Jim?
Who was this C. Bustos so prominently mentioned in all three cables? She is the originator of both 10 October 1963 cables, which have been done in the twin cables by Zil Simplici's State Secrets. Charlotte Bustos was a CIA officer in charge of headquarters support to liaison and support operations in Mexico City. Bustos' name is deleted from original CIA 6-3. She wrote first report on Oswald on October 10, 1963, from the Mary Farrell archives. Only now are we beginning to get to know this superstar operative. No less than 652 documents on Bustos have been recently released, including her 201 file, which was never requested, much less examined by the HSCA. Bustos was involved in CINCA covert operations. Clearly, Bustos' role in Mexico City saga has been minimized, as seen in her very brief and HSCA interview, don't know if we can call it that, where she almost comes across as being upset that she has to be bothered with something as mundane as a congressional investigation into the murder of a sitting president. Before examining this interview, it's important to look into a couple of her fitness reports from 62 to 63. Other Lee Envoy and empty documents show Bustos as case officer for both projects.
Right. So this is the first one for 1962, okay, and it's she's 12 January 29. How old was she at the time of the assassination? 34. Okay, and supervises office staff of Mexico and preparing correspondence, Mexico desk and preparing correspondence, keeping files, carding and training new personnel, desk intelligence officer for important blank and FI operations in Mexico.
Shall I read the evaluation?
Yeah, that's what.
This officer is the person chiefly responsible for the Mexico desk deserved reputation for excellence and efficiency. The complicated and never-ending tasks of project processing, clearance, tracing, and coordination are handled by her with blinding speed and unerring perfection. Procedural problems are there to be solved, and the solutions come with amazing rapidity. Operational problems are worked out thoroughly and conscientiously. No corners are cut, and no principles are compromised. Never at a loss for an answer, this officer never shrinks from any assignment and instinctively wants to take over any vexing problem which is holding up progress. She is complete mistress of file and record resources and answers all queries within minutes. The most complex budgetary and planning projects are handled by her with deceptive ease.
Yeah.
These qualities of rare efficiency and speed are coupled with an even rarer degree of amicability and cooperativeness. Her work, which proceeds under her at such a breakneck pace, nevertheless goes on in an air of placidity and good humor. The large office staff is run without a trace of tension, jealousy, or friction. All of this is traceable to this officer's fine example and catalytic effect on her colleagues. Finely educated, handling the Spanish language with fluency and keeping up with current events in her area, this officer is a unique asset to
the organization.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah, and
I mean, I've never seen such a glowing report.
You just can't get good help anymore.
Yeah, and this one, this one for 1963, and everything.
Okay. Subject's performance during the rating period has been marked by general excellence, as indicated in Section B. Her supervision and direction of the section's work relating to intel reports, administration, preparation of special reports, trained personnel, etc., is uniformly outstanding. The fact that there are functions that these functions are handled in addition to her duties as the desk officer for the FI and Ops support projects, which she performs with unusual competence, serves to illustrate her value to this section. She has exceptional ability independently to determine proper courses of action and to initiate action to carry them out. She has a profound understanding of the area. Operational progress and contributions to it are imaginative and constructive. In the opinion of the rater, subject's performance compares favorably with any G13 desk officer within his experience, and she performs occasionally at the G14th level. Moreover, she carries out her duties cheerfully, loyally, and is close and amicable cooperation with her fellow employees at all levels. In these aspects of her duties, which involve cost, for example, the review of operational projects, she has given close attention to the budgetary matters and has frequently suggested ways in which economies an operation might be effective, meaning improving the economics or cost.
Yeah. So here's this guy who was asked about her in another interview, this guy by the name of Smith, and he was asked if his name Charlotte Bustos was familiar. He said yes, that she was at the Mexico City station when he was there. She was a counterintelligence research analyst under the Western Hemisphere Division. He described her as a very severe person and very diligent and very much the counterintelligence mentality I mentioned before.
That seems very much at odds with the descriptions we've been reading about her amicability with her co-workers.
Yeah, and we're going to see.
That sounds more like a school marm.
Yeah. So, indeed, you know, this memo of 15 March 1963 characterizes Bustos as the soul and motor of that desk, managing many of its operations and supervising its staff, many of whom she has trained. Managing many of its operations. Operations would include Liempty, Lee Envoy, you know, and I can just name so many, you know.
I mean, this is clearly a formidable person, but one who evokes different responses, I think, from those dealing with her.
Yeah. And so this is from J.C. King, who was chief of the Western Hemisphere Division. This guy was just like one step below the director of the CIA, you know, which at that time happened to be a McCone. But anyway, here's where she's recommended for a promotion, okay? And this is what I just cited there, you know. She's been in Mexico since 1951. That's a long time, you know, being in the CIA. And she was from the Midwest, actually. She wasn't Spanish or anything like that. And we'll see what.
Do we have any photographs of her?
I wish I've been looking.
Videos would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Something just tells me she's got big boobs. I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, here's for example, here's a memo before she married. Her maiden name was Zerun, Zehrung.
That all sounds Chinese.
No, but this is I think she was from the Midwest, Ohio, or something like that. It's in her 201 file. It's there. Like I said, more than 652 new documents on this woman, which we never had any details about. She's mentioned prominently in these cables, Jim. You know, I mean, what the hell is going on here, you know? And she's supposed to be, you know, a secretary, you know, and she's supposed to be, you know, a clerk or sometime, you know?
There's no question she's super competent.
Oh, yeah. And guess what? Okay, when we look at the Lee Envoy and Lee Empty, we've been talking about these now for months, haven't we? Okay. Yes. Yeah. If you look here, this is a project report here for funding. Okay. And if you look right here in the middle where I have the mouse pointer, it says case officer.
Yeah.
C. Bustos.
Right.
And all of the people under her, you know?
Right.
And I mean, and this is for Lee Envoy, okay? The wiretapping operation. Then we have this other one here, okay? Lee Envoy, again. This is 64, it says here, this is 63. Actually, the year of the assassination. Bustos, case officer is Bustos, Videla Bustos. Okay, again, very prominently mentioned here in these documents. Okay, now who was this woman? You know, now was she really running Lee Envoy and Lee Empty? I mean, these were the two most important operations. You know, at the time of the assassination, the Warren Commission didn't even know, and they were kept in the dark about both the wiretapping and the photographic surveillance of the Mexico City embassies until they just couldn't keep it under wraps anymore. Okay, where they just had to come out.
She's clearly a major player in Mexico.
Oh yeah, and we've never had this information before, you know, until now, Jim. Okay, now with her overwhelming qualifications, it would not be too far-fetched to surmise that she could have some kind of administrative role in Lee Envoy, wiretapping. The new document certainly suggests that she was not only involved in Lee Envoy, but also in Lee Empty, the photographic. For instance, Bustos is the originator of this cable right here. I'm showing it down here, but she was not just a dumb secretary and desk jockey the way they try to make her out to be. According to memos in her file, she was in charge of operations and training operatives. The Envoy and the Empty docs show her as case officer. They try to lay all of this on good. They tried to lay all of this on good pasture, and that is not the case at all. I believe some redaction.
Extremely interesting.
Yeah, yeah. I believe there's some kind of redaction in documents refer to her. There was a very short HSCA memo by Breckenridge dated 12/3, where she comes across as quite the bitch. We're going to look at that now. Okay, but here's a cable from her that conveys, you know, her authority, Jim. You know, from Bustos. Request station discuss possible one-year extension with Earhart. Okay, he was one of the operatives. Code of Career Service has approved. If this not acceptable, request he extend till December when Lee Envoy. This is the writing of somebody quite in control of the situation, Jim. You know.
Yes.
You know, if Le Caper cannot be implemented, Horsfall can replace Earhart. Cable decision, Earhart. In view of station stand on Le Caper, cited Mexico 5412. Should headquarters withhold requisition for new Lee Envoy equipment? Until notified by
decision. She's moving the pieces on the chessboard.
Yeah, Lee Envoy equipment. These are that means recorders and stuff like that, and electronic equipment. Well, cable later regarding Horsfall ETA. Okay, again, you know, and this document from the Lee Empty photographic report shows Bustos as a case officer of that project as well. I mean, Lee Empty here at the top.
Yeah.
1966.
Now, did she marry? Is that what the happened?
Yeah, she married in 1961. She married an Argentinian guy who also worked at the for the CIA there. All in family, Jim.
Yeah.
So,
we ought to be able to find pictures of them somewhere.
Yeah. So this is the profile of a very important cog in the Mexico City station, yet most of the files addressing this person were not released until 2017.
But that's why, Larry, because she was important, they didn't release it.
Of course.
Yeah.
On 3 December, this is where it really gets heavy. On 3 December 1976, the HSCA conducted a very short interview with Bustos. I mean, if she's mentioned the cables, Jim, come HSCA time, they want to talk to her.
She knew everything that was going on in Mexico and was responsible for most of it.
Of course, and what they did, they isolated her, they buffered her, you know, and this what you're going to see now is proof of that, you know. Now this document had previously been redacted, okay, and I found the non-redacted version. There are a lot of redactions. Clearly, her role had been minimized and downplayed. So this is an interview they did with her, 3 December 1976. This was when the first HSCA head counsel, Richard Sprague the first guy that later on resigned because they wouldn't let him interview and get the documents that he wanted from the CIA, and they wanted him and his personnel to sign confidentiality agreements and stuff like that, and non-disclosure agreements, and he decided not to because he wanted to do a real investigation. So he resigned 5 months later, Richard Sprague. And so this is when he was still the incumbent here, Jim. So interview with Charlotte Bustos, and this is done here by John Leader, Ted Anderson, and the guy that signs off at the bottom, his name is Breckenridge. Yeah, Breckenridge. And he was one of the main investigators also. You want to go ahead and take it right here from paragraph 2.
She stated that she has not yet been contacted by Mr. Kessler. She and her husband have arranged for an unlisted telephone in a post office box to protect their privacy.
Hello? Why? This is the only witness that I have ever come across, okay, that has actually had the audacity to say something like this, Jim.
That's very interesting, Larry. If contacted, she will decline to have any discussions with Mr. Kessler. Wow. She's calling the shots.
Yeah.
Contrary to my understanding, she is returning to headquarters PCS and will be here for some time. Ms. Bustos stated the most important person to whom she can talk is Ann Goodpaster, who is retired to Texas. She stated Ms. Goodpaster was a case officer in the station. She ran liaison. She handled sensitive things for the COS. And after the assassination of President Kennedy, she would have been the one to conduct the reviews at the station. She was involved in investigations of the Duran aspect of the matter. We do not know if Miss Goodpaster is the person interviewed by the Downing Committee investigator. She does not fit the description of a secretary. The next person she mentioned was Millie Rodriguez. She handled Tassaroff and the Soviet transcribers. Ms. Bustos feels that Ms. Rodriguez would be more informed on what happened than David Reardon.
This is so telling here because she's handing this off to everybody except herself. It's like she was invisible there, and the documents bear a completely different person,
Yeah, she was clearly in charge and her tentacles were everywhere.
Yeah.
Ms. Bustos stated that she got involved from the Cuban angle, not from the Soviet point of view. It is her present recollection, contrary to what we have been told, that the Cuban tap was active at the time that Oswald visited Mexico. We discussed the fact that he called the Soviet embassy from the Cuban embassy and asked if this might explain her recollection that Cuban tap was active. She thought not.
Unbelievable.
Of course, all that Oswald stuff was nonsense. 6, Ms. Bustos said when the report on Oswald came in from Mexico, she did not did a name trace on him. She took action to notify the Navy, the FBI, and the field.
She did do a name trace. She did.
Yeah, she did, yeah. She states that the station was told to notify the legal attaché and the 3 military attachés and notify the Pentagon. She said she asked for a photo of Oswald from his military file, which might be used in his identification against photography coverage in Mexico City.
Okay, hold on. Now, if she really did that name trace on him, where is that document? Where is that cable? Where is that memo?
Yeah, that would be pretty significant. She said there was no answer from the Pentagon. In response to our question, she stated that this would mean his military service which probably was the Navy, as Oswald was a Marine. She said she waited for comments and reaction, but there was no response. By way of explanation, she observed that lots of people were in contact with the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City, and no response at that time might not be unnatural. She cannot recall if there was a follow-up.
I mean, this is perfectly set up, for plausible deniability here, Jim, because you're not going to find those documents, okay? And B, hey, the Pentagon, and the DOD never even answered me, Did you do a follow-up on this? I don't know. Don't even talk about that, So there you go. This is how efficient she really was, huh?
Right, that's right. That's a good point, Larry. She stated that initially our telephone taps in Mexico City were unilateral, bearing the cryptonym later. Lifeheat, yeah. Later, joint telephone taps were established and could not recall the date. It came to be known as Lee Envoy. The Lee Envoy LP had about 30 lines, 15 each for CIA and liaison. Most of the embassy lines were switched to Lee Enjoy, but Lifeheat
It should be Lee
continued.
Envoy. Yeah, it should be Lee Envoy. Yeah.
It should be Lee Envoy.
Yeah.
But Lifeheat continued to have houses for LPs all over town.
LPs are listening posts.
Very good. The lines in Lee Envoy were tapped from Central, which Ms. Bustos sees as indicating there was probably no stand down on the Cuban embassy so far as technical reasons are concerned. She felt that the LP case officer managed the distribution of coverage so that there would be no duplications in the lines covered. She could not remember the identity of the person, but she said that Wynn Scott read everything. Ms. Bustos stated that there was photo surveillance on both the Soviet and the Cuban embassies. The Cuban photo surveillance project, Leonian, was a joint operation.
Yeah,
Leonian. Ms. Bustos said that Ann Goodpaster handled the material from Lifeheat, and she recalled that a person named Anderson handled Lee Envoy. Ms. Goodpaster did the history of the Mexican station, would be very familiar with all of it. As Ms. Bustos did not go to Mexico until 1967, her personal recollections are a mix of the period commencing when she arrived PCS and her knowledge from the headquarters desk.
That's not true. She had been in Mexico since the 50s.
Very interesting coverage here, covering CYA right here.
Yeah.
Ms. Bustos stated that when Scott retired around 1969, that the files were purged around 1970. Felt that all permanent material was sent to Warrenton?
Yeah.
Doesn't that mean Washington? Warrenton? It would not be at the station. She stated about 75% of all the paper was destroyed, but that the Oswald file would have been sent to Washington. Ms. Bustos has no real recollection now about what she did at the time of the
Yeah, she's
okay. And she's signing these cables, Jim.
She recalls only the Oswald 201 file. Her assumption is that a task force would have taken over the matter, as was customary of LA division handling special matters, which would take it out of the Mexican branch. We agreed to get some information that might help Miss Bustos refresh her recollection and agreed on a later contact.
They're treating her with
kid gloves.
She's shoveling bowl.
Yeah, they're treating her with silk gloves. You know, it's like, come on. And guess what? Who of all the people in this JFK thing, who are the only people that didn't know what they were doing and where they were when JFK was assassinated?
The most important players.
Yeah, H.L. Hunt and George W.H. Bush.
And Richard Nixon.
Yeah, right. You know, and now Bustos has no recollection now what she did.
No recollection. Nope.
Number 4 now.
Was the president assassinated?
Like, you know, isn't that outrageous, you know?
It is, Larry. This is good stuff.
So anyway, just an example, you know, just to whet, you know, your appetites here on what the new documents are revealing, you know, with people that we never knew about before, what they were doing, what they were not doing, how involved were they, if they were involved.
You caught a big fish here, Larry.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, there's just a lot in those documents.
Maybe even a great white shark.
You know,
a Bustos, a big Bustos.
And the way that they've minimized and downplayed her role in all this, Jim, is
you're definitely onto a key player.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. No doubt.
All right. Looks like we ran out of time. Hey, we pulled another rabbit out of a hat with Larry Rivera. All right. JFK number 243. Great show, fellas. And we'll see you next week.
Hasta la vista. Okay.